Amidst the glitz and glamour and the dancing, decorations, and the celebration at the 2025 US Independence Day celebration here in Abuja, there's still the reminder of the hardship that the Americans had to face in their struggle for independence. Hi, my name is Dorothy Monday, and this is What Do You Think? Now, the American Revolution culminating in independence from Britain was a pivotal moment driven by ideals of freedom and self-determination. Now, this episode explores what they fought for, the historical journey, and the lasting achievements. Now, talking about what they fought for, the colonies sought liberty from British oppression, including unfair taxes like the Stamp Act and Tea Act, and the right to self-governance. Now, the Declaration of Independence, adopted on July 4th, which is now the official celebration of the independence for the United States, was adopted in 1976, emphasized unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, inspiring a fight for democratic nation. Now, most of the American colonists, if they gave it any thought, viewed independence as a last resort during a large portion of their early struggle with Great Britain. Now, ultimately, the argument between the colonists and the British Parliament boiled down to colonialism, colonial identity within the British Empire, and the colonists felt that they were entitled to the same constitutional rights that governed the lives of those who were still in England because they were subject to the British king and descended from Englishmen. Now, these rights, as expressed in the Magna Carta 1215, the Habeas Corpus Act of 1679, and the Bill of Rights of 1689, among other documents, were interpreted by the Americans to include self-taxation, representative government, and trial by jury. Now, the Englishmen exercised this right through Parliament, which, of course, at least theoretically represented their interest. Now, since the colonists were not represented in Parliament, they had plans and attempted to exercise their own rights of Englishmen through colonial legislative assemblies such as Virginia's House of Burgesses. And of course, the Parliament, however, saw things differently. It also agreed that the colonists were Britons and were subject to the same laws. But it viewed the colonists as no different than the 90% of Englishmen who owned no land and therefore could not vote, but who were nevertheless virtually represented in Parliament. Now, under the pretext, Parliament decided to directly tax the colonies and passed the Stamp Act in 1765. Now, when the Americans protested that Parliament had no authority to tax them, they were not represented in Parliament. Parliament responded by passing the Declaratory Act 1769, wherein it proclaimed that it had the authority to pass binding legislation for all Britain colonies in all cases whatsoever. Now, after doubling down, Parliament taxed the Americans once again with the Townshend Act 1767 to 68, When these acts were not met, with riots in Boston, Parliament sent regiments of soldiers to restore the king's peace. This only led to acts of violence such as the Boston Massacre, 5th of March 1770, and acts of disobedience such as the Boston Tea Party, 16th of December 1773. Although the main dispute centered on taxation, Americans felt their rights were being infringed in many other ways. Under the Intolerable Act of 1774, Britain declared that American protesters could be tried without juries in Vice Admiralty courts or even sent to England for trial. Now, British troops were permitted to stay in privately owned American buildings, and Massachusetts lost its representative government as punishment for the Boston Tea Party, with a military governor appointed in its place. Additionally, land police, including the Royal Proclamation of 1763 and the Quebec Act of 1774, American expansion westward, despite the settlers' belief in their rights to move into these territories. Though the colonies largely saw themselves as distinct entities within the British Empire and wouldn't unify for years, their common English heritage and past collaboration in wars against France forged bonds. Their shared opposition to Parliament's measures only strengthened these connections. And after the Intolerable Acts were passed, the colonies expressed solidarity with the Massachusetts and began preparing their militias. Now, looking at history and key events, the revolution began with tensions in the 1760s and 1770s, leading to the First Continental Congress in 1774. Now, key battles such as Lexington and Concord in 1775, Saratoga 1777, and Yorktown 1781 marked the war's progression, with George Washington leading the Continental Army. Now, the war ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, recognizing US independence. The Continental Congress had voted in favor of independence from Great Britain on July 2nd, but did not actually complete the process of revising the Declaration of Independence. Now, originally drafted by Thomas Jefferson in consultation with fellow committee members John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and William Livingston, until 2 days later, the celebration of the Declaration's completion was initially modeled on that of British King's birthday, which had been marked annually by bell ringing, bonfires, solemn proclamations or processions, and oratories. Now, such festivals had long played a significant role in the Anglo-American political tradition, especially in the 17th and 18th centuries, when dynastic and religious controversies racked the British Empire. The choice of which anniversaries of historic events were celebrated and which were lamented had clear political meanings. Now, looking at human stories and contributions, we look at stories and contributions of ordinary people who played crucial roles, like Abigail Adams advocated for women's rights, Honor George sought freedom as an enslaved person, and Henry Knox, who led logistical efforts for children, and diverse groups, including African Americans and Native Americans, also contributed, highlighting the human cost and complexities of struggle. Now, achievements and legacy. The US established the Constitution in 1788 and the Bill of Rights in 1791, creating a democratic framework. The revolution inspired global movements for independence and democracy, though challenges like slavery and inequality persist, with ongoing efforts to fulfill its ideals. The story of US independence is a tapestry of human struggle and triumph, with the revolution's ideals of liberty and equality shaping a nation. Of course, though challenges may remain, but yet they are again celebrating their independence. With that being said, what do you think?